I hope you'll follow along because I'm going to be going right down this passage this morning. I think you can see that in the outline. We're going to be highlighting several verses, beginning in verse 8. Now, you know we've been doing the life of David for several weeks now, a couple months actually. This morning is the end. We're getting to the end of David's life. And this is sort of the benedictory story of David. Now, you know, last week we talked about how there were giants that David couldn't kill. David was unable, because of his age and the importance that he had as a symbol of Israel, his advisors no longer permitted him to go out to war. And what we have in today's passage is sort of an explanation of how that happened and why that happened, and a little bit about David's philosophy for building an army. Are you ready for it? 2 Samuel 23, beginning in verse 8. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. Here's why Terry is going to be grateful. Josheb-Basshebeth, a Tekomonite, was chief of the three. He raised his spear against 800 men, whom he killed in one encounter. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodai, the Ahohite. As one of the three mighty warriors, he was with David when they taunted the Philistines gathered at Pas-dammim for battle. Then the Israelites retreated, but Eleazar stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day. The troops returned to Eleazar, but only to strip the dead. Next to him was Shammah, son of Agi, the Hararite. When the Philistines banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled from them. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. During harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So the 3 mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. Such were the exploits of the 3 mighty warriors. Abishai, the brother of Joab, son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 3. He raised his spear against 300 men, whom he killed, and so he became as famous as the 3. Was he not held in greater honor than the 3? He became their commander, even though he was not included among them. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. And he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club. He snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. Such were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He too was as famous as the 3 mighty warriors. He was held in greater honor than any of the 30, but he was not included among the 3, and David put him in charge of his bodyguard. You're welcome. This is a great passage for a bunch of reasons. Mostly because for all of my life, from as long as back as I can remember, and as long as I have life into the future, I want to learn a bunch of stuff. I want to keep learning stuff. I don't even know the stuff I want to learn. And the thing about learning stuff is that as you learn, you change. Your opinions change. You grow. You figure stuff out that you didn't know before. And even though you used to maybe not like cauliflower, as you get older, you might decide to like cauliflower. And the big question I have, Kieran went with the kids, didn't she? Is there any reason anyone, no matter their age, would ever like squash in a baby food jar? No reason whatsoever. But who knows? Maybe if I gave it a chance, I would like it. A while back, we were out to eat, and Shannon ordered fish, and I could not figure out why in the world she would order fish. I think we were at Texas Roadhouse, which is the weirdest place in the world to order fish. I mean, there is only one thing you order when you go to Texas Roadhouse. You decide which steak you're going to have, but you know you're going to have steak. True or false? And you're going to eat too much bread. That's the other thing at Texas Roadhouse. But she got fish. I think I really overindulged that night. I had steak and ribs. And I was just enjoying my meal so much, and Shannon seemed to really be enjoying her fish as well. Oh, this is so good, Dewey. This is so good. You should try this fish. And I said, Shannon, I hate fish. I have always hated fish. I don't like fish. And she said, but maybe your taste buds have changed. I said, no, they have not changed. Fish is gross. And she said, I have never in my life, she started to raise her voice and get a little angry with me. I have never in my life known you to try fish. How do you know you don't like it? And I said, okay, one bite. And she forked off this big clump of white, ugh. And I said, nope, I'm not putting that much in my mouth. She made a little smaller bit, and she held her fork over, and I tried to pretend like we were being romantic as she reached across the table to feed me from her fork. And you know what? It was just as gross as I ever thought it would be. You were hoping that I was going to like it, weren't you? I did not like it. But here's the thing, I tried it. Maybe something would change and I would like fish. But no, I had an upset stomach all night. It was not from that giant steak and those ribs I ate. It was from that one little tiny bite of fish. As you get older, the tendency is for most of us to get set in our ways. We settle down into what we think and what we believe and what we know, and those things become entrenched because we've known them forever. We don't need to think anymore. We don't need to learn anymore. We just keep listening to people who are telling us what we already know is true. So I try to make it a point periodically to read books that I don't especially want to read. You know, I have a whole list of books. I have 2 shelves of books that I need to read, that I want to read. The shelf never gets smaller. It gets bigger. Books get added to that. But periodically, I will read books from authors that I have nothing in common with, that I'm really not interested in, but I feel like I need to learn some stuff. I need to find out what other people have to say. So sometimes I'll read a novel. And then once in a while I'll read a biography of somebody. And then something about how to be a good pastor. You should all be grateful for that. But then I'll read something completely different. A history of the civil rights movement. I'll read authors that I'm not interested in just to learn from their perspective, because I always want to be learning. I always want to be growing. I'm telling you all this to encourage you to be this way. Learn stuff. If you have a particular, now I'm going to say something that maybe will get me in trouble. Shannon is not here today, so there's no one to clear their throat at me. If you have a particular political view, watch the news for the next week on the network that has the opposite political view of you. Seriously, it's painful. It's painful, but it'll be good for you. If you're conservative, watch MSNBC for a little while. If you're progressive or liberal, watch Fox News. Take a chance and learn some stuff. You may not agree with it, but you may find out that those people on the other end aren't as bad as you think they are. It's possible. Now, all of that rambling seems like it has nothing to do with this story that's not even a story in the Bible. It's just a series, it's just a recounting of a list of people who were in David's special elite force of mighty men, and some of their exploits, probably their most dramatic things they did. But here's what's important and why I'm putting this all together. Because David, to the day of his death, surrounded himself with people who made him better. Years ago, in a previous church, there was a whole group of school teachers in the church. And I know we have some school teachers in this church, and I know this is not you. But I had this one school teacher who every year, when student teaching assignments were passed out, and I don't know how this happens. I don't know if you volunteer to have a student teacher or if you're just assigned a student teacher. Whatever it was, this woman hated having student teachers, and it seemed like she had them all the time. She hated having student teachers, and her answer why she hated student teachers is because they come in with so much energy, and they just want to change everything, and they think they know stuff. Well, to me, that's exactly the wrong attitude. If you got somebody coming in who has energy and ideas, you put them to work and you learn from them, no matter how old or young they are. That's what David knew. Let's just get started. Let's start in verse 8. The name of these people, these are the names of David's mighty warriors. And then he names Josheb-Basshebeth, who killed 800 Philistines in one encounter. The first thing that we learn about David's mighty men, the people who were closest to David that he surrounded himself with, the first thing we learn about them is that David surrounded himself with men who were stronger than he was. Men who were stronger than him. He was not intimidated. He did not feel like he had to be the strongest guy in the posse. He got strong people with him. You ought to surround yourself with some strong people. Now, that maybe is physically strong, which this morning, as I look around the congregation, I'm thankful that I am surrounded by people who are stronger than me. I am pretty certain that pretty much all of you are stronger than me, physically. But you need to have people around you who are stronger than you, who will push you always. Maybe not intentionally push you. Maybe they'll not be one of those, what do you call those guys when you're lifting weights? The guys who yell at you. A spotter? They yell at you till you lift the weight that you really can't lift. Maybe you need that physically, but you definitely need people around you who are stronger than you spiritually, stronger than you organizationally, relationally, emotionally. Surround yourself with people that are stronger than you, people that you feel inferior to, not so you can feel inferior, but so that you can get better. I used to think, whenever I thought of this passage, I thought of the basketball team at Duke University. Duke, a fine United Methodist school. And I used to think of them because this was before the one and done era. You all get the one and done era, right? Kids go to college, they play sports for 1 year, and then they become a professional. It was before all that happened. And year after year, they still do it, but it's a whole different philosophy at Duke. But year after year, the best players played at Duke. Every year. And it made no sense if you just look at it. Why it's a tiny little arena they play in. It's kind of a snobby little school. Why would kids want to go play there? Well, you want to go play there because you want to play with the very best. The ones who are the strongest. If you're the strongest, you want to go play with the other strongest. That's how you get better. And you may sit on the bench for 3 years before you get your chance. But when you get your chance, surround yourself with people who are stronger than you. That's what David did in verse 8. Then in verse 10, David surrounded himself with people who were braver than him. Remember when David was a little boy and he was brave enough to go face a giant? But David knew that even though he was pretty brave, he ought to have people around him who were braver, because that would make him even more brave. In verse 10, it says, Eleazar stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. He battled these Philistines so long that he couldn't get the sword out of his hand when it was over. He was that brave that on his own, he took on this whole army and won. We ought to get people close to us who make us braver, who don't intimidate us with their bravery, but encourage us by their bravery. Next verse that we're looking at is verse 12. David surrounded himself with people who were more committed than him. Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck down the Philistines, and the Lord brought about a great victory. Have any of you ever stood in the middle of a lentil field? I mean, that's where this scene takes place. Shammah. How about a bean field? You ever stood in a bean field? Have you seen a bean field? Now, this doesn't work in a cornfield, because a cornfield you can't see across. The place where Molly lives is right across the road from a cornfield, and she was shocked last fall when the farmer finally came out and picked his corn, because during the time the corn was standing there, somebody built a whole house on the other side of the field. And suddenly the corn was gone. She had neighbors. It doesn't work with a cornfield, but a bean field is a lot like a lentil field. The soybeans will grow about waist high for most people. So I want you to picture being in the middle of a bean field. There's no place to hide in a bean field. If you're in the middle, you're just easily surrounded. I know in movies, when the good guy gets surrounded by the bad guys all wait politely until the previous bad guy gets killed before they attack. You know what I'm saying? You've seen that, right? So, I don't know, who's a guy this happens to? James Bond. I was thinking of Jack Bauer, but maybe it's James Bond. It's James Bond, and the first bad guy comes at him, and he dispatches him somehow, and then the next bad... Well, that's not how it works in real life. If you're my enemy, and I'm surrounding you with a bunch of my buddies, I'm not going to wait until the guy before me gets killed. When he's attacking you from the front, I'm coming from behind. You're going to kill as few of my buddies as possible. Here's this guy in the middle of a bean field with no help, just himself, and he killed everybody. That's not bad, is it? He was more committed than David was. He didn't get to the edge of the bean field and say, no, I'm not going in there. There's no way out from there. He was more committed to the cause. He was so committed to the cause, he was willing to stand his ground when there was no ground to stand. Now, you and I all need to be committed. We need to be completely committed. We need to be more committed than we are. And so one way to do that is to surround ourselves with people who are committed, more committed. I have a friend like this. He's a pastor. We years ago went to seminary together, and we've just been great friends forever. A lot of times we pastor churches that are close to one another, and we get to spend more time together. Right now in Indiana, we are just about as far apart as we can be. I'm serving here. You know where we are in terms of all of Indiana. He's serving a church in Angola, Indiana. Do you know Angola? It's the northeast corner. If you drive an hour past Fort Wayne, you hit Angola. We don't get to see each other very much anymore. We used to plan monthly lunches together where we'd meet somewhere in between. We don't do that anymore because somewhere in between is a 3-hour drive, and by the time you drive 3 hours, lunchtime is over. So we talk on the phone. We Zoom chat with one another. And here's something about Tim. Every time I talk to Tim, I know before the conversation is over, he's going to say to me, Dewey, how's your walk with the Lord? How's your prayer life? Every time. I just know he's going to do that. And sometimes I think I ought to do it first, because I know he's going to do it. I ought to ask him first and throw him off. But that's kind of his role. It's his job. He is someone who makes me be more committed than I am, because I know he's going to ask me that when I talk to him next Thursday. So I've got between now and next Thursday to get my walk with the Lord in really good shape. Do you see what I'm saying? Find people who are more committed than you are. Here's number 4. David surrounded himself with people who were closer to God than he was. The story is that David was in this stronghold, but just protected from the enemy at this particular moment in time. And he got to longing for home. David grew up in Bethlehem. That's why Jesus was born there. Remember, he was born in the city of David. David was from Bethlehem. And there was something about the water that you drink in Bethlehem, the well at Bethlehem. The water was especially tasty for David. I will never get to taste again the water from the hose at the barn on the farm I grew up on. Mom and Dad have sold the farm and moved away. I'll never get to drink that water again. But man, that's great water. Oh, after a day of baling hay, you just turn on the hose and you spray it all over you, and then you just drink and drink and drink. Oh, it's so great. And David was having that kind of moment. He said, oh, that I could drink some of the water that's in the well at Bethlehem. And these 3 guys, 3 upstarts, 3 idiots, maybe, they heard that. They said, David wants the water. Let's go get him the water. And they took off in the middle of the night to get David the water. They had to penetrate enemy lines to get to Bethlehem. They got him some water, a cup of water. They didn't bring back a bucket or a drum or even a gallon. They brought back a cup of water. And when they brought it to David, David wouldn't drink it. David wouldn't drink it because it had to become a sacrifice. Because these 3 men risked their lives to do something that David wasn't willing to do himself. Now, there's a lot we can pick up from this. One thing would be how much these 3 men loved David, how beloved David was by all his men, no doubt, that they were willing to take these chances and make sacrifices for him. Or maybe it's just because when they heard David saying this, and the way David said, I wish I had this water, they understood it as a spiritual thirst. Let me encourage you, if you don't do any of these other things, surround yourself with people who are closer to God than you are. Find people who love Jesus with all their heart. I'm not saying they have to be like freaky Jesus people, hippie type weirdos. I'm not saying you have to have some kind of weird dress code or give up steak at Texas Roadhouse. But find people who are more committed to God than you are, who are closer to God than you are. That's a constant search in my life, to find people who love Jesus with their whole hearts. And sometimes I connect myself to people who are kind of weird because they're so weird. But most of the time, it makes me get closer to God because somebody else can serve as an example for me. Here's the last one. Verse 20, David surrounded himself with people who were more prepared than he was. The story of Benaiah is a great one. Benaiah performed great exploits, it says in verse 20. 20. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. Some translations say these were two lion-like men, two lion-like warriors. Now, I don't know if lion-like means that they had lots of hair, a big bushy beard and wild hair like a lion's mane. Maybe it just means that they're ferocious and they scare the heck out of you when they growl at you. Maybe it just means that maybe it means they eat the people they kill after they kill them. I don't know. But it's important to note that these were two mighty warriors. They were celebrated. He struck down a huge Egyptian. The Egyptian had a spear, and Benaiah just had a stick. And somehow, Benaiah was able to get the spear and kill the Egyptian with the spear. And then the most amazing one to me is that Benaiah killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day. You think about all the things that can go wrong in that situation. Earlier we talked about the guy who was in the middle of the bean field, and in the bean field you can easily get surrounded, but now you're dealing with a lion. You can't really rationalize what a lion is going to do next. And Benaiah not only was facing a lion, he was facing this lion in a hole. He couldn't get out. He was stuck there. If he turned around to climb out of the pit, the lion will attack. He had to face the lion and fight the lion. And maybe the only thing that could happen that would be worse than being in a pit with a lion was that it started to snow. Can you imagine trying to keep your footing in a fight, a bare knuckles fight with a lion? And that was the kind of person that David wanted to be around. I want you to keep on growing, to keep on changing, to keep on learning. I want you to be a better person today than you were yesterday. I want you to be more holy, more spiritual, braver, more willing to follow God closely next Sunday than you are this Sunday. And the way you're going to do that is to surround yourself with people who are already where you want to be next Sunday. There's a thing on the bottom of your outline in the bulletin, a takeaway point. I want you to read that with me. Are you ready? Today I commit myself to be the person that God wants me to be. I will surround myself with people who will make me stronger, braver, and more holy. Jesus, our prayer is that you would work in us, make us stronger, braver, more holy, and give us the grace and the humility to surround ourselves with people who help us get there. Amen.